Okay, we get started? Good, we're all here on time. We'll begin with a blessing and then we'll jump in to our text. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We thank you, God, for the Torah, for texts of meaning, and for the opportunity to reflect upon them to improve our lives. Amen. So, last week we were together, we looked at chapter 7, and Jonathon was chiding me a bit that we got through 2, maybe 3 verses, which is true. So I thought I would try to get us into one verse, see how long we can take it, before looking at the rest of chapter 8. So we're going to do this in classic Torah study fashion, as if you were sitting around the table with a bunch of rabbis. So we'll look at chapter 8, verse 1. Do you all have that handout? Some notes there? Okay. So this is how we engage a text when we're doing Torah study. Here's the translation. Who is like the wise? Who knows the interpretation of a thing? A person's wisdom makes their face shine, and the strength of one's face is changed. So here's how we're going to begin to unpack it. The first is to just appreciate what it means to be wise, which is what we're getting at. Who is like the wise? What are the characteristics of someone who is wise? What does it mean to be wise? Have I shared with you the plumb line of wisdom cross-culturally in societies? Wisdom has been studied such that we can appreciate that every society in the world has individuals within it who are recognized by other members of the group as wise. Wise men, wise women. And so the study is, what are those qualities, or what are the characteristics that wise people share, such that among a large group, a few people get identified or recognized as being wise. And what seems to be the case across cultures is that there are 3 qualities. One is you have to be old enough. We can say that someone's wise beyond their years, but to be recognized within a culture or a society as being wise, you have to have had enough experience, enough successes, enough setbacks, enough reversals, enough accomplishments, enough success and surus. You know the Yiddish word surus, which means sort of trouble. Right? In order to be wise, you've had to experience enough and lived long enough to merit that. The second is typically an individual who's recognized as wise has suffered some challenge or setback or difficulty that they've overcome, usually early in life, certainly as your younger self. And if you think in your own mind's eye about those individuals or any person you've come across or met or recognized in the wider cultural firmament as being wise, perhaps they have each of those 2 qualities. And the third is that, at least in the study, was that they're focused outward onto others. I like to think of it as recognizing that they're grateful. That wise individuals recognize that they have that the world deserves a sense of gratitude for what they do have, in spite of what's gone wrong or in spite of what difficulties they possess. And so if we're going to take the biblical mandate to be wise or to grow in wisdom, it's worth appreciating. So what does that mean? It's not just being smarter or having more book learning or degrees at the end of your name that you can list out in abbreviations or books on the shelf, but there's some other quality. I don't want to over-determine it for us. I'm not sure I know the answer. But what is it to grow in wisdom, or what is it to aspire to be like the one who is wise? That's how chapter 8 begins. Yes? You can jump in any time.
Do we value wisdom in our society? Perhaps not as much as we did. I heard a no. Do we value information? Yes. And then related, but kind of adjacent, knowledge. Knowing things, knowing information. Yes, but wisdom is related but seems something different. And is it the consensus we would value information and knowledge more than wisdom?
Is wisdom more understanding?
Just what we were talking about. That's what we're asking.
Perhaps,
the question.
Right? It has a quality, it has some kind that speaks to it, right? Amassing knowledge, or let's just say data, which we know is being monetized, right? All the data is a form of information. Knowledge is the accumulation, isn't it, of information?
Yeah.
pretty much, yeah?
Right.
Yes?
Would wisdom then be the synthesis, the ability to take a certain body of knowledge and then find ways to apply it into situations that would allow you to find the right outcome?
So the question is could wisdom be understood as the ability to synthesize information, to connect dots and to see patterns or to learn from this domain with regard to this domain? It's certainly a higher level of intelligence, right? To be, rather than learning, memorizing, or knowing what to do in a given situation that you might do repeatedly. But the idea that there's something that's a higher level of intelligence or a higher level of understanding. Maybe it's getting to us towards wisdom.
Who else has an opinion? What is wisdom?
Russ?
Man-
We'll get you one, two. Russ.
Well, there's an enormous industry growing up around artificial intelligence.
Yes.
It just struck me, no one has ever aspired to or thought to create artificial wisdom.
A fantastic article idea. Huge artificial intelligence. Nobody's come up yet with artificial wisdom. Hold on a second. It's really fun. That's an attorney who's also a theologian. Brian, would you say generally what you do?
I'm an economist.
He's an economist. And Nancy, and we're about to get the Google manager here in just a minute offer opinion. Nancy?
I'm just a retired technical writer.
Retired technical writer.
Anyway, test on it. But I think wisdom carries with it a bit of judgment. And that ability to weigh matters and come up with some kind of answer. And we don't like judgment in this culture right now. We don't want to be judged. We don't want to be told something's right or wrong. We want to just, the way the country is. I don't know what the rest of the world is like, but.
Very good point. Wisdom seems to have a sense of judgment to it. Discernment
That's the word.
would be another
That's what I
word.
was thinking.
Just discernment feels more neutral than judgment, which is judgmental. Don't like that. Discerning still sounds okay to us. Is that accurate? Discernment is that's the word we use in church a lot. What is discerning God's will in this moment? What is the most famous example comes to my mind is King Solomon did what with the baby? This is my baby. No, she stole it. This is my baby. So wise, that's the paragon of wisdom, is Solomon. So what was Solomon's discernment or judgment with this case in front of him? Cut the baby in half, which is the most outrageous answer you could possibly give. But why is that answer wise, Nancy?
He discerned that the real mother was not going to let that happen.
The real mother would not let that happen, of course. But it took somebody, so there is a judgment or discernment that is part of wisdom. Is that fair? Nick.
There's this common thing, there's this curve of like knowledge, right? And as a beginner, you start out and you're thinking, I actually know a lot about this, right? And you don't. And so you come up with these big bold statements and they don't apply at all, right? And the second stage is that you start realizing all there is out there. And I don't actually have any idea what's going on. And I can't answer any question here because there's so much here I don't understand. And then you become sort of an expert, and as an expert, you feel like you know everything, right? And I feel like part of wisdom is being able to figure out like, where you are in that curve in any respective discipline, and knowing like, when do you ask more questions, and when do you like say firmly like I know what I'm talking about, and I can answer.
Did people hear that? So it's very similar to college too. When you start anything, a lot of people think, oh, I know all sorts of stuff about this. Freshman year, I took a class in that, so I now know it. By your sophomore year, or as you get more involved in a musical instrument or discipline, oh my gosh, there's all these things I don't know. And then over a course of time, you learn, and then you take all this in, where you know what you don't know and can begin to fill in the gaps. That's a sense of wisdom. I see that with priests. That's one of my jobs is to help train the new priest. The worst thing that one of our, not our current people, but seminarians said, I kid you not, the first day he walked in and said, if I want to change something, how do I go about doing that here? And T.J. Freeman, if you remember him, said, Jonathon, I've never seen you mad before, but you're about to rip his head off. So he said, oh, I got it, I'll help. Dude, buddy, no, you don't know what you don't know yet. You're just going to break something. Listen, pay attention, look and see and learn what this group has to do, how the community operates and all those things. And then your opinion's valuable, but it's honestly not that valuable yet because you're not ready to listen to anybody else. Why should we all listen to you? That's a very dumb beginner mistake. And he's a good kid, now a good priest. But learning what you don't know is an essential part, it seems, of wisdom. Steve?
I wish I can remember who said this, but there's a quote that I read in a Peanuts cartoon.
Charles Schultz, wisdom. Go ahead.
It was attributed to somebody, but I don't remember that. And it is, knowledge without wisdom is double folly.
Knowledge without wisdom is double folly.
Yeah, if you are not wise enough to apply your knowledge, you've screwed up twice.
Denise?
I think wisdom is the ability to see in history patterns, the same problems over and over in different situations, and be able to gain from understanding why things work better in some ways than others. To be able to see again in a completely different situation the same problem and learn from history to stay positive and find a better solution.
Wisdom is the ability over time to see patterns in problems and opportunities, and then to, you didn't use the word, but to synthesize, to see in the future, oh, this happened in the past or something very similar, and can apply that knowledge and discernment to this future problem. That's very excellent. Margaret?
Makes me think of awareness and acceptance.
Awareness and acceptance are part of wisdom.
Because you have to be aware of what is there. You have to accept what it is, and it's your actions on what you do.
They're part of knowledge, perhaps not part of wisdom.
Say that again.
They are part of knowledge.
What
perhaps
is
not
they?
part of awareness,
Awareness is part of knowledge,
but not necessarily part of wisdom.
but not necessarily part of wisdom. Okay?
Aware of something happening.
I see.
I agree with all of this, and I also think that it's the way that they're able to convey a message is usually calmness and steadiness so that others can hear thoughts.
I really like, I'm sorry, you're making me think of something while you were talking, which that to me is a very good statement. This is not what she said, but what it made me think of. The ability to hold two different ideas in your head at the same time and not lose your mind seems part of wisdom to me.
So that's a quote on F. Scott Fitzgerald is the one who suggested that genius is the ability to hold conflicting ideas simultaneously.
Say what you said again, please.
And it's also the ability to convey them without losing your mind.
The ability to convey them,
So-
to think them, have them in your head, and then to convey that in an articulate manner that's not fueled with emotion, one that you can calmly say, here's option A, here's option B.
Because you have the awareness of what others might be thinking, because you can feel the room.
Feeling or reading the room is a very important part of that, it seems to me. Allison?
There's something that says, change the things I can change and the wisdom to know the difference.
Oh,
And the other thing is, I wish I'd known at 18 what I know now.
that's a great Rod Stewart song called Ooh La La. Do you all know it? We're not going to sing. Yes, gosh, how does that quote?
The Serenity Prayer.
Well, not the serenity. Youth is wasted on youth. How does that go? Youth is wasted on the young. Thank you. Yeah, it absolutely is. What Allison was also suggesting is a serenity prayer. Where does that come from? What organization or group? The Oxford group, which later became 12-step, which was Sam Shoemaker, the rector of Calvary back in the late 50s, early 60s. And the 12 steps, the 12 steps, which Alcohol, Narcotics Anonymous, and so on, is essentially Christianity with the particulars taken away. And so the whole pattern, or the 12 steps, is one of the greatest things is, you could say, here's the first step to wisdom. There is a God, I am not God. A lot of people never figure that out. And you can tell immediately that they're the center of the whole universe. And in fact, they're not. And learning wisdom over time, within 12-step, what Aaron was talking about earlier, you have to have fallen several times, failed, experienced. We would say in our tradition, I've just written a sermon for a group of clergy, that as a priest, you will experience crucifixion in your life, your ordained ministry. Once, twice, 3 times, and it will completely crush you. And if you come through it, you'll be a far better priest than you ever were before. And it's not about you, not about me. You need to get out of the way to let Jesus come through. That's the whole idea. And 12-step, until somebody, let's say an alcoholic, is willing to say, I have a problem, what's going to happen in his or her life? Everybody else may know, my God, that dude's drinking all the time, he's on another bender, and he'll say, I don't have a problem, I got it under control, I can do my job. But until that person, he says, I am an alcoholic or I have a problem, what's going to happen? A whole lot of nothing. The same old thing. That person has to come to that first step, which you could say is a realization of self and the way things are in the world and my place in them. I have a problem is a wisdom, it seems to me, or expression of wisdom. I don't know this is an expression of wisdom. I'm good at this, but I'm not the best ever, but I have some competency. I think that's also wisdom. Brian?
I also think that
Sorry, I didn't mean to take over there.
Is an idea that wisdom also has to come attached to some moral or ethical paradigm. You can have knowledge, outside of the realm, but wisdom has to have that as a means to.
That is a fascinating concept. Wisdom must have an attachment to a moral or ethical, is it what you said? Moral or ethical paradigm. Now, back to one of the earliest things, do we value information? Yes. Do we value wisdom? Not so much. Is one of the reasons because it's attached to a moral or ethical paradigm, which means some things are right and some things are wrong. That's judgment, as Nancy is saying. I want to do whatever I want.
I was going to say along those lines that we don't think of monetizing wisdom, like information and knowledge. You can put that on your resume and rise up the corporate ladder. People don't apply for a job and say, also, I'm very wise.
Right. I'm outgoing, I'm a people person. My fault is I care too much and work too hard, and I'm really wise. That's on my resume. I was thinking of that earlier. You can't monetize wisdom, was how it appeared to me. But I'm not sure if that's right. I had to think about it. But we don't ordinarily think of monetizing wisdom. We do monetize.
Or associated with power. In other words,
Ooh.
a lot of wise people are people of low estate. It's not tied to worldly. You could have a wise ruler, but in a way it's an oxymoron. You might have it, but you might not.
You might have a wise ruler. Again, Solomon in the Bible would be the paragon of that. But it seems to me, and please state your opinion, that rulers, how you get to be a ruler in America is not because you're wise, nice guy, nice gal. He's always thinking of others. No, it's cutthroat, male, female, whatever the office. You have to get there, and it's not wisdom that puts you in that place. Is that accurate? Sorry, somebody else had their hand up over here. Nick?
So it feels like one of the things I'm hearing here is that because there's morality involved, it's not necessarily that you can't monetize wisdom, it's more that wisdom is relative in some...
You can't monetize wisdom necessarily, but wisdom is relative?
A little bit, yeah. Like different moral codes, different ways of thinking might have different definitions of what it means.
That's an interesting idea. That's very postmodern, I would say, that that morality is relative. Well, whose morality is it? Or there is no morality, there is no right and wrong anymore. That's a relatively new idea, by the way.
Well, we're talking about the thought of what it takes to be a leader in America. Does that mean that you're wise, right? There are probably many people that think many of our leaders are wise, right? And there are many of us that might think that they're not. And it feels like there's some demonstrable relativity there.
I couldn't hear the last thing you said.
It feels like there's some demonstrable relativity there, whether it's actually true or not. It's like
Demonstrable relativity if our leaders are wise. I don't associate a single current leader with wisdom. And I'm not trying to be mean or funny, but that's not, if I had to say, name the top 10 characteristics of current president, last president, whomever, wisdom would not be on that list.
Okay. All right, let's go back to the text. So we agree that wisdom is not knowledge, that it has something to do with discernment or being able to judge between things. It has to do with comportment, who you are in the drama. Again, picture in your mind someone you recognize or from history or your own experience who you ascribe wisdom to. It's something that is more difficult to monetize or to quantify, and clearly has something to do with experience as opposed to a body of learning.
It has to do with season.
Seasoning. Okay, so we're talking about enough years, enough experience over time, right? We don't want to over-define it, but we have a sense of what wisdom is in that regard. Just to give you a little bit of context, there's a collection in the Talmud called Pirkei Avot, or the ethical teachings of the sages, and they ask a series of questions, not unlike the ones we're asking. They ask, who is wise? And the answer that the rabbis in the Talmudic period give is the one who learns from every person, which suggests that humility is necessary. You can't be wise if you believe you're smarter than everybody else and have nothing to learn from others. Indeed, wisdom is understood in the rabbinic tradition as that which, as a characteristic of one who is able to learn from every person. Not necessarily what to do, maybe what not to do, what doesn't work, right? Part of the concern, at least I have, about young people not going back into the office and being in a setting with others is they're simply not learning from the socialization process of what to do and what not to do, which is what we learn when we're in social interactions with others. So wisdom is something that not everyone achieves and has little to do with how much you've actually learned in the classroom or how much you know about a given set of activities that require certain skills. But let's see what the rabbinic tradition says about this particular verse. Who is like the wise? Who knows the interpretation of a thing? And we're going to understand that thing being wisdom. So here's how we break that down. The word that's used in this case for interpretation is an unusual word named pesher. Usually the word is pitaron, which is sort of an opening or an interpretation. But this notion of interpretation is of a deeper kind, a different understanding. In the same way as there are different words for to know something. Biblically, to know someone is to have sexual relations with them and then have an intimate knowledge of them in a different way than when we simply interact with each other. To pursue wisdom or to interpret a thing in this context is different than the kind of interpretation or opinions or connecting the dots, perhaps, between disciplines. It's a deeper understanding, and here's how it's understood. It's found in other places. The idea is that this type of interpretation is a deeper insight for hidden meanings, not what's necessarily on the surface. The interpretation of a thing is not intellectual mastery, but the ability to see beyond the surface, beyond the person who's in front of you, listening, if you will, not for just what's being said, but for what's not being said. We've referred to this before, that plumbing the text, we can use these 4 levels: what's on the surface, pashat, what's hinted at, what interpretations we can make, and then a deeper secret level that may not be available to us. That the poet, I think it's Rilke, said that even between the closest of people, there are infinite distances. So when we think of our relationship with another individual, that even among the closest people, there are infinite distances, and we may feel that with regard to our own relationship with self, that somehow that eludes us. Something about wisdom has to do with getting a deeper understanding of what's going on beneath the surface. One of the reasons I imagine that politicians are not considered wise is because so much of a politician's life is defined by what's pragmatic or what's possible or the sausage making of politics or of legislation, and that doesn't quite square with sort of the Yoda, right, or the sage who's observing things and has a deeper understanding that yes, you may legislate this policy or you may enact this law or what have you, and it may accomplish or move you towards the goals that you have established, but wisdom is something larger than that. Right? Wisdom is knowing that this too shall pass, for instance, right? Or people are motivated by things that you may not be aware of, that they may not be aware of. Yes?
How is truth related to wisdom?
How indeed is truth related to wisdom? Can you help us?
I don't know.
It's a great question.
To tell you the truth, I don't know.
To tell you the truth, you don't know. All right, we're going to keep going. We're going to come back to it maybe. Perhaps, this is the third bullet point down, perhaps true wisdom is the ability to see hidden layers of meaning, whether it's in the Torah text, the biblical text, Jesus' message, life itself, the world around us, being able to recognize something. The rabbis speak of 70 faces of Torah, implying that Torah study or life itself is an ongoing process of uncovering deeper levels of meaning. To appreciate that we don't have all the answers, that there are things that are timeless, and each interaction we have is in and of itself unique. There's something about that. Let's also appreciate, if we ask who is like the one who is wise, who knows the interpretation of a thing, it seems fair to ask, this is the next, the next piece, is what does it mean to grow in wisdom? What does that suggest? To me, it suggests a deeper appreciation of what we don't know, or for the timeless truths that are operative without regard to who's in elective office, or how much your income is this year versus last year, or what's going on around us.
It may be a better use of what you do know.
Wisdom may be a better use of what you do know. Okay? Right? My dad used to say that good judgment comes from experience, which comes from bad judgment. Right? Part of wisdom is knowing what not to do, right? Or what not to say. Right? This doesn't require anything of you. Or someone was referring to emotional states, staying calm in a given situation. It's the smarter move. There's wisdom in not provoking somebody in a way that they can't recover from. That kind of idea. A lot of us do with the interactions with others and knowing who we are individually, who each one of us is in the drama that we're engaged in. I'm looking at the next phrase. A person's wisdom makes their face to shine. I got curious, where else in religious literature or in our respective traditions do we have this notion of someone's face shining? Yes? That's right. When Moses goes to the mountaintop and comes down, he's seen with his face aglow, shining. You'll notice in the second to last paragraph on the page, Exodus 34:29, we have that reference. In that reference, the notion of shining is from the Hebrew verb karen, which means horns also, which is how Michelangelo's depiction of King David or Moses rather, had horns, because those are the rays of light in a cartoon, right? When someone's emanating or glowing, that's the image. And yet here, the notion of how the face is shining is different. And that's an interesting word choice. The English translation doesn't help us much in that regard. Moses' face is radiant as he comes down from Mount Sinai, which references specifically a glow from his face, whereas in Ecclesiastes 8:1, the verb to shine is typically translated to shine, but carries a different nuance. This is the closely associated with the idea of illumination or giving off light, but does not necessarily imply a glowing or radiating physical light in the way that Karen does. What then can we say about that? What does it mean that your face is shining? Or, in the next phrase, what does it mean that your face has changed? Or this, you can read that last piece as either the strength of one's face, that's a compound, the strength of your face, which is often translated as countenance, is changed. But it could also be read as strength changes your face. And strength, right, we're just re-understand, sort of putting commas in different places in terms of how the Hebrew is laid out. It could be understood in either way. The strength of your face is changed, or the strength changes your face. The wisdom you come into, the power of that when you realize something, and you have an understanding or an appreciation or an aha moment. Oh my gosh, I'm behaving exactly as I saw done in these situations. For instance, you're like, oh my gosh, I wasn't even aware that was going on. And so the strength of that insight, maybe you've at one point or another learned something, perhaps about yourself or your own family, such that now with that knowledge, you approach things very differently. You see someone, maybe as you're becoming a parent, you see your own parents differently, or after an experience that allows you to connect the dots that we were saying, you can appreciate the universality of it, even as it's uniquely one's own. So I'm thinking, when have you had that experience or known someone who's had that kind of experience? Having learned something you can't unlearn, or having grown in wisdom, you now approach others in a very different way. What does it mean? What's wisdom done in that regard? How does wisdom change a person? And if in that case wisdom is truth, right? How does that? Johnson's made reference to his heart attack and the experience immediately afterwards. We know I've been listening to a number of interviews of late. It's sort of been on the circuit with Senator Fetterman. He speaks about after his stroke, a different kind of awareness, or approaching life with a different understanding. He references the fact that in high school, one of his best friends was killed in a car accident, and just walking around through life with the awareness that you may not know it, but this may be the last 15 minutes of your life, has given him, Senator Fetterman, a kind of wisdom with regard to what am I going to do with this day that I'm waking up to and the time that's ahead of me. Right? There may be something you've experienced that causes you to see the world differently. You're wiser now. You have a knowledge now. Yes?
Isn't the word understanding sort of the final and great step to wisdom?
Isn't understanding the gateway to wisdom?
Lights up and I get it.
Perhaps so.
You can tell somebody that has come to peace with himself, there's a certain serenity.
Okay. So a wise person has a degree of understanding, a degree of serenity. Excellent. There was other hand, yeah?
I like your thought here that you're talking about it's a softening of your countenance. In other words, it's not a countenance of strength. It's an understanding there might be more than one way to look at it. You may be right. And so you're not just coming to say, I know the answer. You're accepting to say, there are many ways.
Everyone catch that? The idea that your face is changed, it's a softening, right? Or of the hardness, or the certitude, if I can play a little bit with the idea that when your face is hard, or you are certain of the way things are, that certitude is at odds in some way with wisdom, such that you're softened, or you have an appreciation that yours may not be the only way, or the understanding you brought to this moment has only served you so well for so long, and now there's a new understanding. Yes?
Let me offer just a little bit different interpretation of my feeling forsake yourself that you have. It has to be something that the others see in you.
Good.
And like a person who makes your face shine, people see that in you and they look at you differently because they see that you are wise in a certain area.
Love that. So wisdom is something that's ascribed to you as opposed to something you can claim. So when when my classmates and I were first year rabbinical students in Jerusalem, one of my friends had an Israeli girlfriend and wanted to set us up on a double date that I should join them with one of her friends. And with our pidgin Hebrew, my friend assured his girlfriend that I was nechmad v'chacham, and I'd be a perfect match for any Israeli girl. Nechmad v'chacham means he's nice and he's wise. That's a strange selling point, right? For trying to get the first date.
He's good looking and he's rich.
Right, he's good looking and he's rich. Right? There's a Hebrew idiom that men say, perhaps, about women when they're introducing them to their parents, right? He yafa v'gam he ofa. She's beautiful and she bakes. Okay. It's a dessert topping and a floor wax. Okay, other thoughts about what happens when you come into wisdom or you gain an understanding? Yes?
It seems from what you were saying earlier, it's almost a quiet confidence or a comfort in what you know.
That's nice.
You're not shouting down anyone to prove what you know. It's what I think I heard.
I like that.
You have a quiet confidence that what you know is true, and you are willing to let others perhaps present their views.
I like that.
Not shouting them down. You are accepting it, but you know that the knowledge you have provides a sense of confidence and comfort to you.
I like that.
You repeat that.
I'm sorry, you have a different perspective. In life. As you gain wisdom, right? And there's also a sense of equanimity, or someone that affirms calm. I'm trying to think, if you think of whoever it may be in your mind's eye about who is wise, it's likely the case that they're not histrionic, right? It's likely they don't fly off the handle. Those aren't qualities, right? To react emotionally and rashly is not a characteristic of the wise, right? Better to write the angry letter, put it away, sleep on it before hitting send or posting it in the mail, right? That's some wisdom in that. Yes?
I think also, to me, it would also involve some kind of humility.
Yes.
Because that would be what would allow curiosity and discernment. And without that, you would just know it all and not count it.
This comes with some humility, right? I remember Bob Dylan's line was, I was older then, I'm younger than that now, right? I thought I knew as much more when I was youthful, and now I realize how little I know, or how humble I ought be, given all I have is my own experience, right? I can extrapolate. All I know is what I see around me. I can extrapolate, but there needs to be humility in approaching wisdom. At least we said we can't claim it for ourselves. It's not a quality, a personality quality you'd put on your resume. That I'm industrious and I have a strong work ethic and I'm wise.
Charlotte, did you say wisdom requires humility or produces humility? But it seems to be. It seems to be, yeah.
Let me get back, and anyone can jump in too, but I want to get back. What I want us to appreciate also, one of the takeaways, is that it seems to me in this verse that we're saying that the interpretation of wisdom, or the pursuit of wisdom, over and above material things. Remember we said that wisdom is more valuable than oil last week, right? That it's of a different caliber or quality, a different domain than that which you can go buy off a shelf and bring home. You acquire wisdom in a different way. We were saying last week that we can amass a lot of things, but integrity is something that we have to surrender if we're going to lose, right? As opposed to gaining something. So humility is certainly a key. Let's also appreciate, this is how I read the verse, where it says, who knows the interpretation of a thing? A person's wisdom makes their face to shine and changes their countenance. Wisdom, in this context, it seems to me, is not something that one day you realize you now possess, but rather it's the lifetime or life's work in pursuit of wisdom that is itself the path of wisdom. That is to say, wisdom is not, it seems to me in this case, a destination or the shining city on the hill or something you finally get to and now you live in the house of wisdom. That may be an aspiration. We take a tour of the house of wisdom. I gave that sermon a number of months ago here. But the idea is that the interpretation is, in Jewish tradition, the wrestling with God is. That's the theology, or that's the relationship that we have to wisdom. I mean, a wise person certainly wouldn't say, well, I now can check that off the list. I've accomplished that. The way a high school diploma, we've achieved that. And now we move into the rest of our lives. Charles?
I don't think a wise person would ever say that.
Would ever say what?
I've already learned that now.
Right. A wise person wouldn't claim they've already learned it. Right? Why not? Why would a wise person not make the declaration, I've already learned that, I have nothing more to learn?
Because the wise person always knows there's something else to learn.
That's right. Right? Because wisdom begins with the idea of humility, or there's more to learn, that I don't know it all. Right? I can extrapolate from my experience. It seems to be true in these situations. My experience may be helpful to you as I share it with you, but I don't have all the answers. That's the start of wisdom.
If I were to say, I'm a wise priest, that would be analogous to me saying, I'm the most humble priest in the whole diocese. You're clearly not if you have to make that statement.
Right.
Steve?
From what you're saying and from what I'm hearing, it seems as though wisdom gives you a comfort with yourself. That you feel more comfortable in giving your viewpoints and in listening to other people's viewpoints. That you don't get upset and you don't get frustrated.
Did everyone catch that? The upshot, we can certainly argue for the negative. If you don't have that attitude, you're not a wise person, right? That doesn't mean you're not smart, doesn't mean you're not experienced, doesn't mean, yes, one, and we'll come across.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think though, there's maybe this idea out there that once we have wisdom, there's a certain point that we know everything or we're aware. Like you said, part of it is the striving, but I think there's some idea out there that wisdom would make you comfortable or not, that
Yes.
would put you at peace. And the wise people I know, I don't think are people who are fine. Like they're always striving, they're always working, and they're uncomfortable sometimes with things they see, right? Because so I don't know.
You don't know that wisdom necessarily brings comfort.
No, I don't. Yeah.
Right. I mean, what if your wisdom is that the wise person recognizes the life is unpredictable and that the world is unfair and that, as we will see later in chapter 8, the righteous aren't always rewarded and the wicked aren't always punished. And that's not comforting news. But understanding that is a path towards wisdom. Yeah?
Maybe a better word than comfort would be
Equanimity. A degree of acceptance and having to be okay with that. Right? All that's unresolved in our hearts. Rilke, the poet, says, love the questions themselves and live long into the answers. 1, 2. Allison and Ross.
I think faith in God has a great deal to do with wisdom. One of my favorite stories is a man that was sitting screaming. He said, I'm a self-made man. And when the audience said, somebody should tell the Lord.
Uh-huh.
I think faith in God that things will come as planned and wisdom that it will happen is a great part of wisdom.
Excellent. So faith is a handmaiden to wisdom. Yeah, I'm going to get Russ and then we'll come back.
I was thinking about the book of Job. Job's three friends are clearly not wise. They're trying to help, but they don't get it. At the very end, the last spoken line from Job, famously, as I have read, and I don't read Hebrew, famously, it's almost untranslatable. You may be saying two very different things. One some wisdom in the fact that it's written that way.
Right.
I'm sure the rabbis have had a lot to say about it over the years and centuries.
Nobody could hear that.
You mentioned at the very outset of this class that is one of the wisdom points.
The book of Job. Right. Yep.
Would you
Yeah.
repeat that for everybody?
For those that didn't hear, Russ was suggesting that he was reminded of the book of Job, which is considered one of the pieces of the wisdom literature from the Bible, and that Job's friends, encouraging him in various ways, are themselves not wise, yes, but that Job's final words, which are hard to decipher or to understand and to translate, may even be at cross purposes to each other, contradictory, and that itself may be part of appreciating the wisdom, that there may not be a single answer or a unifying field theory such that all the parents and all the children are hearts to be turned towards each other, and the lion will lay down with the lamb, and we won't learn war anymore, and right, there may not be that one resolution or unifying field theory, and that itself may be the ultimate truth that one has to accept. And in accepting, there's wisdom, right?
May I point out that this topic has generated more response than anything I remember in 10 years. I mean, we made it a couple lines, which is great, but talking about wisdom, did you notice that? It was like everybody had something to say and was interested, and we could keep talking about it probably for a long time. I find that fascinating in itself. And then it occurred to me, other than church and books I read or people, I don't ever think about or hear the word wisdom at all, unless I go looking for it, and again, it's church related. Do you have a similar experience? Where do you encounter the concept of wisdom outside of here? In the library, if you go looking for it. Is it in our pop culture, mainstream culture, wisdom?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, Yoda.
Yoda, as a character in a movie, yes. He's also downstairs in the bookstore. Yes.
I think it's the negative of it, in the sense that we're always trying to say, you're so dumb.
Some people do that, say you're so dumb.
We have our structure of what is wise, but I said you were dumb, and what you're saying is not wise, so it's a contested concept.
Okay, so the comment was made that rather than people pointing out the wise among us or calling out wisdom when we see it, we live in a time when it's much more familiar that people are called out for being stupid or dumb or what they don't know, right? Let's agree also, because we started with the idea of knowledge versus wisdom, that we know more than any generation before us in terms of the amount of knowledge that's been accumulated. Yes, the amount of book learning, the amount of, just think of technology, the abilities we have now far outstrip anything anyone who's ever lived on earth has known. And yet, with regard to wisdom, we don't seem as a species any wiser than those who came before us. We still make the same mistakes. We still prioritize the wrong things. If we're going to really focus on what's good for the greatest number or what's the way in which we ought to live, we may know the right thing to do, but the pressures in this way or the pressures in that way or the numbers or the proportions seem overwhelming. It's hard to focus on living a life of wisdom when we're trying to just pursue enough to be able to cover the monthly expenses and all the rest. We're not any happier than previous generations. We compare ourselves to one another and those people around us, and while we all have indoor plumbing and electricity and all kinds of things that grandparents or great-grandparents could never have imagined, turns out we're not more satisfied. We're not wiser as a species. That itself is sort of fascinating, isn't it? That the pursuit of wisdom, or that the wisdom dies with you, you've got to relearn it. It's a complex notion, the idea of wisdom in contradistinction with knowledge. But, yeah, Margaret.
Somehow I think that wisdom, and I look at wisdom as back in history, a lot of people had great deal of wisdom. My parents
So Mark pointed out that in generations past, there seemed to be, at least in your own family, a recognition of greater wisdom. Or certainly we look back and imagine it. I don't want to take it away from them, those earlier generations. The founding fathers of the country. Right. We live in an age when there are other things distracting us, or other demands made upon us, or expectations we've created for ourselves that have nothing to do with wisdom per se, but have to do with stuff. Okay, final thoughts.
We
Yes.
gotta go.
Yep.
You said that wisdom has been associated with suffering. And I'm like, actually, can you acquire wisdom without suffering? Is that a precondition?
It seems to be.
What's the three things?
The three things are: you have to be old enough to be wise, you have to have suffered something along the way, usually earlier in life, and it's typically understood that you're then outwardly focused. So if you think of the person in your mind's eye who's wise, they were generous in a way. I translate that more as being grateful and maybe paying it forward, or being good to others is how one expresses that. But recognizing that amidst all that life doesn't provide, or all the frustrations and difficulties, to be grateful is a position of wisdom. Nick?
Just in a pop culture sense, right, it feels a little bit antithetical. I'm trying to think about how wisdom would play into a sitcom or something like that, right? Having somebody who walks in who says, hey, I know what's important here. Here's what's going on. Like there's no drama to it. There's
Right.
no excitement to it. I feel like maybe that's part of why it's started to kind of erode within our culture. So it's not valuable in that sense.
Yeah, or it's not immediate or tangible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you all very much.